Hi, I'm Dan Cortopassi. Welcome to Model Building. In this episode, I'm going to build a pair of G-scale passenger cars for our Halloween train. This year, Nichole and I finally have a train in our Halloween maze. It's just a simple loop for now, but we wanted to have some special cars for what we're calling the Boo Train. Back when I first got into large scale and didn't fully understand the difference between the different scales that run on 45mm track, I ended up with some undecorated Bachmann old-time passenger cars. I was wondering what to do with them when we started talking about a Halloween train. I realized that I had several freight cars that could make a mixed train with the passenger cars, and since they're all smaller than 1:20.3, they should look okay running together. In this episode, I'm going to focus on the passenger cars. Later on, I'll also talk a little about the loop of track we're setting up in our graveyard area. My goals for this episode are to paint the passenger cars, apply decals, and assemble the cars. I'll start by washing all the parts that need painting. This will get rid of any skin oils or leftover chemicals from the kit making process. Since I'm doing this project on a deadline, I decided to streamline things as much as possible and use mostly spray cans. Normally I don't like rattle can paint, but I found that Tamiya paint goes on very thin and smooth with airbrush-like quality. I'll prime all the parts with Tamiya fine surface primer. White is a good base for other colors, especially reds, oranges, and yellows. Originally I was thinking of a black and orange scheme for the cars, but I wasn't crazy about any of the ideas I was coming up with. Then Nichole suggested purple, and I thought a purple, orange, and black scheme might look pretty cool. After priming, I left the parts to dry overnight. Now I can focus on the individual colors. I'm using Tamiya TS-24 dull red on the seats. The car bodies and interior walls get a coat of Tamiya TS-24 gloss purple. I decided to use my airbrush for the letterboards and the sides of the roof. I'm using some Polyscale Rio Grande Orange that I found in my paint drawer. I thinned the paint with a little Windex for airbrushing. This paint is discontinued, but any medium to light orange color would work here. Since the orange dries flat, I followed it up with some microgloss to prepare the surface for decals. After leaving the orange to dry overnight, I masked the letterboards and sprayed the car roofs with Tamiya TS-82 rubber black. This is an off black, really a very dark gray, and it dries with a flat finish. If any of you used to build car models back in the day and remember a color called hot rod primer, this is close to that. After giving the paint a few days to cure, it's time to apply the decals. I'm using 3 different sheets of water slide decals for this project. I found this fun set of decals of skeletons and other scary things on eBay. It's made by a company called Gopher Racing and is intended for model cars. I bought 2 sheets. For the Boo Train lettering, I found 1/4 inch tall extended Roman by K4 decals. I bought 2 sheets of these also. And last, for the car numbers, I'm using Microscale sheet 8775 for HO scale Southern Pacific steam locomotives. I'll start with the letterboards. I'm using a ruler to center the T in the middle of the Boo Train if you count the space as a letter. I'll apply all the decals in the conventional way. While each decal is soaking in water, I'll wet the area where the decal goes with some microset. Then I'll carefully transfer the decal to the model. When I'm satisfied with the positioning, I'll apply some Microsol to soften the decal and make it conform to the paint and surface details on the model. The K4 lettering decals don't have breaks in the decal film around the letters, so it's important to trim them as closely as you can. My first thought was to use the ruler to space the letters evenly, but then I realized that because the I is so much narrower than the others, it wouldn't look right. So I'm spacing the T, R, and A in train 5/8 inches apart, then eyeballing the I and the N. Once I figured out how far the N was from the T, then I went back and placed the B the same distance from the T in the other direction. All the letters in Boo are 5/8 inches apart. The K4 decals are a little more grabby than Microscale decals and sometimes require a little more microset to coax them into position. I had to pop a lot of tiny air bubbles by gently poking them with the tip of a sharp hobby knife blade, then applying more Microsol. The Gopher decals have the backing already trimmed close to the graphic and work very similar to Microscale decals. After giving the decals a few applications of Microsol, I washed the car bodies in water to get rid of any decal fluid residue and then sprayed them with a clear coat to protect the decals. I'm not a big fan of Bachmann large-scale couplers. Since I'll be running these cars on fairly broad curves, I'm going to body mount Katy couplers instead. I'll start by cutting the truck-mounted couplers from the trucks. I've swapped the original plastic wheels for metal ones from Bachmann. I had a pair of Katy 830 couplers in my stash of parts, so I decided to use them on the coach. I assembled them according to the directions. It's a good idea to make sure that the coupler swings back and forth and returns to center as it should. On the Combine, I'm using KD906 couplers, which have the same body mount draft gear box, but a more realistic looking coupler head. If I'd had any more 830s, I would have used those instead, since realism isn't a big priority with these cars. The floor of the car is higher than the end beam, so I'll need to fabricate a coupler mount. I'll use the score and snap method to cut some black 40,000th styrene. Using black will save time since I won't need to paint it. I've cut the pieces a little longer and wider than the KD draft gear box. I'll laminate 4 together using liquid styrene cement. Now I'll glue them to the car floor behind the end beam to hold them in place while I mount the couplers. Note that the glue here is just to hold the part while I'm working on the car. I wouldn't trust glue alone to hold a coupler in any scale. I've installed a screw from the top of the car floor to help hold the coupler mounting pad. After drilling and tapping 2 more holes on each end, I mounted the couplers with the supplied 256 screws. The screws poke through the top of the car floor slightly, which should make for a solid mechanical connection. I filed down the screws even with the floor. I'll dab some black paint on them to hide them. The kits didn't come with instructions, just exploded view drawings. I've screwed down the trucks and now I'm attaching the truss rods. They're a press fit, but I found that I had to enlarge some of the holes by spinning a hobby knife blade in them to get the clips to engage. The kit comes with parts for an onboard battery-powered lighting system. I'll secure the on-off switch with 2 of the smallest screws that came with the kit. I'll tackle the roof next. It took me a while to figure out how this was supposed to work. The 2 pieces with the holes should be put in first, along with the window glazing. The cross pieces with the notches fit into slots in the inside of the window glazing pieces. The 2 pieces without notches should be toward the ends of the car. Then the reddish pieces with the holes can be attached to the cross pieces with the holes. The longer parts fit into the notches in the other cross pieces. Note that the 2 parts are not the same length. The shorter one goes on the end of the roof with fewer windows. There are some electrical clips included that look like they're intended to be installed along with the roof glazing, but since I decided to replace the supplied bulbs with LEDs anyway, I'm not going to use these. I'm using 3mm red LEDs for these cars. If you want to see how I prepare LEDs, please refer to Model Building HOSP Consist Part 8 LED Primer on this channel. I have placed 2 LEDs in each roof, in the locations where the bulbs were intended to go. Each LED has its own 470 ohm resistor. This isn't a DCC install, but just to keep things straight, I'm using blue wire for the positive common and red for the negative. Now that I have the roofs wired, I can screw them to the car bodies. I had a difficult time attaching the window glazing. There are clips at the top of the car, but I found them to be almost more of a hindrance than a help. I ended up using some canopy glue to attach the glazing, and I had to remove some material in places to get it all to fit. The end railings on the car are a press fit, kind of like the truss rods. Some of them are a little wiggly. The kits come with a 9-volt battery holder that mounts under the car to make it easy to change the battery. I'll need to wire this to the on-off switch before I can install the interiors and complete the cars. The battery holders have metal clips that need to be installed. Once they're pressed in place, I'll use some pliers to bend down the solder tabs. The battery holder clips to the bottom of the car. There's a hole in the floor for the wires to pass through. I've wired my switch so that the car will be on when the switch is toward the car side and off when it's toward the center of the car. Note that I've only used 2 of the connections on the switch, and only one side of the circuit needs to be broken to turn the lights off. I'm using the black screws that came with the kit to attach the car interior to the floor. I've routed the wires under the floor to the bathroom compartment. Note that the bathroom and stove fit under the car interior floor. The stove needs to be installed before the interior floor is screwed down. The interior bulkhead in the Combine slides through clips on the floor near the center of the car. The Combine side doors fit into tracks inside the roof and in the interior floor. I spliced the wires coming up from the floor to the wires coming down from the roof. Now I can assemble the car. There are clips on each end of the body that fit into slots in the floor. 4 screws secure the body to the floor. It was a little tricky to get the Combine together because of the doors, but it's done. All that's left is to install a battery and test the lights. I set up a simple loop of track in the graveyard area of our Halloween maze. The track is mostly LGB and the curves are LGB's R3 size, which makes an approximate 8-foot circle or 48-inch radius. The track is resting on top of the gravel we have in this part of our yard. Since this is a temporary arrangement, I didn't add any additional ballast or support. I can push the gravel around to help level and even out the track. It seems to be working well enough to use it for our Halloween maze display. I used rail clamps over all the rail joiners to help hold the track together. The connections are purely mechanical. All of my large-scale locomotives have onboard batteries, so I don't need to worry about track power. Eventually, I want to build a permanent track in this area that will connect to a larger garden layout, but that's for the future. I think the passenger cars look pretty good running with the freight cars. Maybe in the future I'll do some more with the freight cars to make them look a little more like part of a Halloween train, but these will work just fine for now. I've put my Bachmann Big number 5 on the front of the train. I bought the passenger car kits I used for this build before I fully understood all the nuances of large scale. Since they're too small to look right as 1 to 20.3 scale cars, they've been languishing in storage for years. Using these cars for a Halloween train was a fun project that gave them a purpose. I'm sure a lot of us have some equipment stored somewhere that doesn't really fit our main modeling interests. A fun project like this can be a way to find a use for those models. For the most part, I built these cars straight from the box without modifications other than changing the couplers and using LEDs. This was kind of a nice change of pace for me since I have a tendency to take on projects that require a lot of extra detail and problem solving. Though large, these are relatively simple kits, and other than some issues with the windows, they went together pretty easily. Most of my modeling projects are more serious, so doing this project was something different. I had a lot of fun building these cars. All aboard the Boo Train! I'm pretty happy with how these cars turned out, and I think they look really good on our Halloween maze. Happy Halloween, and if you liked the video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching!